Nice comment from Tony Scales. He's saying it's not a question, but great to see how the Smart Sunderland programme has continued to thrive. We spend a lot of time in the telecoms industry, he's from the supplier side, talking about networks and equipment, but all of that is only there to capture and transport data. You've done a brilliant job showing how places can create real world value from that data. Partnership, Sunderland and Boldyn, leadership, Liz and Patrick, and patient capital are at the heart of this success story. So yes, Liz, Boldyn, round of applause there. I think that was it sums it up nicely. So I just want to start off with your thoughts on smart places and cities, integrating with housing and health, the NHS, that end-to-end one view that Ian's just been articulating there. Can we really have smart places if we don't have that 360 view of people that we serve outside of the current silos of the public sector? Liz, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Thanks, Helen. Fully loaded question there to start.
It's a big question, isn't it?
It's
yeah.
a big question.
Bearing in mind, we don't do politics.
I think if people online recall back to, I think, my first slide, really, which is our layer cake. And in effect, so that's what we were describing with our layer cake. We were describing building a whole system, putting in place the connectivity on which we could layer any kind of device, sensor, solution, etc., building a data architecture that could host all of that data so that we could work for individual ambitions or collective ambitions across the city. And that was with our health partners, our education partners, our business partners, and that's what we've gone on to do. So we work collaboratively with, on economy type projects with people like this and the football club. We'll work very much on social projects with health partners. We'll work on reducing crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour with police and fire colleagues. So I think it's really important for me that absolutely 100% agree with what Ian was saying. You can't do this as one organisation, particularly when you're in the public sector. You have to do it on a whole place approach, and the systems that you put in place and the partners that you go out to seek and the technologies that you architect have to be, for me, on that basis.
Yeah. I'm talking about architecting things and the infrastructure underneath. I mean, it's quite clear the infrastructure is key, Danny, because actually it's what you build on top. So, Danny, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I would say, look, the infrastructure's there now, right? So we've got the technology. There's no question in terms of, do we have the technology to do this? It's there. The infrastructure's there, and we have, we've got the need exists, and Ian rightly talked to, healthcare is a requirement. What's missing from my perspective is central joined up thinking, because if you think about it, the healthcare provision in the home will become a cost to bear for local authority, right? So can we put technology networks and IoT networks and infrastructure networks that allows us to deliver provision of services to the home all day long? Yes, we can. Actually, the challenge is that, who's the beneficiary of that? Well, it's hospitals, and so it's creating reduced waiting times in accident emergency. It's beds being freed from wards. So you get the circular impact of benefit, but actually a siloed view in terms of budget and spend. So that joined up thinking at a central government level needs to percolate through to ensure that we invest in local authorities to make those inward investments, to take the technology to the homes, because the technology stack exists. It's there. The IoT platforms exist, the data platforms exist, but actually are local authorities being given the budgets that enable the savings to be translated through into GP surgeries, hospitals, waiting rooms, patients' beds, all of these things. So I think it's that for me is the missing piece in the jigsaw, that we're really missing now. Industry is waiting, local authorities are waiting, but we just need something to happen centrally on funding.
Interesting. So, Ian, yes, would you agree with that? Do you think that needs to change? Because Danny's right. A lot of that infrastructure there. Yeah.
I agree with it from Danny's perspective, but not from a national government perspective. No, because the reality is that Sunderland is an exception. That probably that 20-year agreement is unprecedented. Or was it 30? 20 years, it's unprecedented. I'm certain of it. The reality is that you have created this bond of trust over 6-7 years, and you are just starting to measure the impact, i.e. in the next few weeks. Right now, that's where the standard comes in. That is why we need a standard that has got the reputation of an ISO, for example, that can tap into what Sunderland has done to lock it into a vocabulary that is translatable across the board, that has the backing of the right businesses, the Baldwins, you have to build this critical mass. Then government can take a risk. But bearing in mind that the government risk measure is probably 18 months at the moment. Nobody's going to take a risk beyond it still doesn't work. I think it has to work from a local authority perspective, from a business perspective, from the partnership perspective you were talking about. But I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think just to come on to that, look, I agree, but it is a big spend for local authorities to push more care into the homes, and it becomes a cost on their bill. It grows the bill for local authorities while shrinking the bill for NHS. So that's where I'm talking to in terms of that joined up taking approach. But maybe something proves a great petri dish.
It doesn't, because you're talking about the NHS, but the NHS, for the most part, is not responsible for social care, and social care is the cost to local authorities. So if we can prove the impact in terms of reducing the cost for social care, that's where they're hemorrhaging, and that's kind of critical. Now, the question is, can you measure prevention? That's the challenge as much as anything else. So it's the measurement side. But I don't think it's just about the NHS. I mean, the NHS is looking at getting closer to the home, and then the data part becomes fundamental. Can you provide the interoperability? Can you give people, access to the kind of information necessary for virtual wards, et cetera, et cetera? I think that part is happening, but Liz, your local authority, do you think it's health or social care that could potentially be the drivers as to where the money could come from?
I think it's about a whole system approach, and I think the money comes from across the board. Clearly, a lot of the work we're doing in terms of assistive technologies is that preventative angle. So we are, delaying the need for people to go into residential care, for people to go into hospital care. We're enabling people to come out of hospital faster because we've got the right wraparound equipment. So absolutely, but I think, if you try and start at a whole system, you'll end up in planning paralysis. You'll never make any progress. So, what we chose to do in Sunderland was to absolutely align initially with all of our partners around the city, health, education, business partners, and start to put the infrastructure in, start to get some quick wins. Clearly, we're very focused on ourselves and delivering public sector reform and delivering efficiencies and delivering better outcomes for our residents. And clearly, over then the last couple of years, as we started to get traction and we've started to build trust and we've started to put the infrastructure in place, then others can equally benefit. The football club in the city, here in the North East, football is king. People love the football club. We regularly attract record crowds every match. But it was an island of black spot connectivity. The football club on their own couldn't do anything about that, could not release their own productivity gains from improved connectivity. It was only working with us as a city council, central government as a funding body, Baldwin Networks as an expert infrastructure provider, that we were able to unlock all that funding and turn that around. Now fans have got fantastic connectivity and the club is benefiting from much, much improved kind of communications. And so for me, that's how this needs to work.
Elizabeth, I'm going to come back onto inclusion in a minute because there's a lot of questions around inclusion. But given the infrastructure, given the fact that there are silos across, there is the NHS, there is local government, there is social care, etc., and the funding between them. So, one might invest, but it's the other one that's going to get the benefits. So there's no incentive there. How beneficial would it be in terms of, one plan, one view, one approach to digital inclusion and access approach? How much would that help to have that one view from the top, to have coordination?
It would be absolutely huge. And fans of digital inclusion work will be aware that last year there was the Digital Inclusion Action Plan came out from DCIT, and there was a lot of hope, and there remains a lot of hope. But there's still a need for the kind of action and momentum that actually joins this up between the different government departments. And there's still this kind of perception that digital inclusion sits somewhere, and in different local authorities it sits in lots of different places. Sometimes it sits in libraries, sometimes it sits in adult social care, it sits here, it sits there, it sits all over the place, and it can't just sit in one place because it is now foundational, it is fundamental. It has such a massive impact on the delivery of every single kind of service, whether it is health and social care, whether it is education, whether it is jobs and economic growth within an area, whether it's leisure services, environmental health. Even if you want to report that your bin hasn't been collected, you've got to be able to go online to fill in a form. Every element of digital transformation links back in, but it's still sort of seen as this little extra. It's almost it's the equivalent of CSR, where it sits in the private sector. Is digital inclusion is still sometimes seen as this nice to have, and it's not necessarily, certainly at main Whitehall level, being taken as this absolute fundamental enabler for all of the other plans, all of the other strategies that are coming out, and whether that's around growth, whether that's around health. Doctor in your pocket is one of the things that came out in that NHS 10-year plan. Well, you're only going to have a doctor in your pocket if you've got the device, if you've got the data and connectivity, if you've got the skills and the confidence to use it. But we're not yet seeing that level of join up. And I think the day we do, that's the day that we'll start to see the agenda move forward, but also the funding that is needed in local authorities, the funding that's needed for infrastructure, the funding that's needed across the piece. That is what has to be released. But with no clear business case, it's incredibly difficult to make that case for all of the savings and all of the social return on investment that's going to come through from making these changes.
Yeah, Liz, can I bring you back in on this one? Because actually, there is this siloed mentality in the public sector. Historically, I mean, it's been, the public sector, you wouldn't start from here if this is a greenfield site because it's grown up over hundreds of years. What is it? City Corporation of London is over 900 years old. I mean, wasn't created for a structure for the modern age. But now that we've got this, as Elizabeth says, there are issues that cross everything, like digital inclusion, as Ian has said, multi-generational, agile aging, etc. It's across every service, and we still look at things in silos. And yes, Sunderland has done amazing things, but there was a question that came in towards the end, and it said, what single thing would you ask our next Prime Minister or Chancellor to fund? Now, we don't do politics, so let's take out, because, let's face it, it's all changing so fast, we can't follow it. But what do you think, what is the main thing that needs to change? Is it a return to like place-based budgeting across with one view? What do you think is the one thing that would enable you in Sunderland to take advantage of that brilliant underpinning connectivity that everybody's using, but everyone's doing their own thing in their own budgets? What's the one thing?
Oh, it's a really difficult question. I did ponder on it when I saw Tony had posted that in the chat there. But I think for me, there's something. The government have funded a huge amount of pilots, and many of those have remained as pilots, and then funding's run out and the pilots have died. And that's been a feature this week, Helen. For me, I think we really need to focus on funding, things like we've done in Sunderland, a blueprint for sustainability, a blueprint for scale, a blueprint that goes outside of your organisation and across organisations. That'd be my ask of government. Come and fund Sunderland as that blueprint and make that happen. Elizabeth's quite right. Digital inclusion, it's huge, and that's why for us it's been a huge part of our programme from day one. Leaving no one and nowhere sits behind wraps around the entire model. We've had a really active digital inclusion programme for the last few years. We've just launched our new digital inclusion strategy, which is a strategy that will take us through from up to 2035. And it is about that access for everyone, reliable internet data devices. But that's got to be, building digital skills has got to be a huge part of that. And for all ages, as Elizabeth was saying, we focus massively on confidence to connect, making people feel safe, making it simple, making it enjoyable. And also now, of course, it's the it's the fake news and everything else that you've got to deal with. But we've also got to face as organisations in our city designing services that work for everyone, making them inclusive, accessible, community, having that community focused design. But massively for us now, it's about engagement right across the city. As organisations in the city, we actually have big budgets. We always talk about knocking on Whitehall's door for money, but we have big budgets and we can do a lot more in extracting value from the organisations within the city to further enhance and fund agendas such as this. A lot of our funding now is coming from our mainstream funding. So if you look at CCTV, I manage our CCTV control room where I've always had a budget for that. We're taking that now and putting it into next generation CCTV and pushing that out across the city. We've always had a budget around adult social care. 70% of the council's budget goes on social care. It's taking some of that budget and reformatting that into assistive technologies and the preventative agenda. So, we can, as organisations in a city, work together to reconfigure our budgets. And if we in Sunderland as a local authority decided to take the lead, yes, we did take the lead. We did develop the models. We did bring on the partnership. We did some of the first investments. We did some of the first bids into government to create the first networks, etc. But we've created that for the whole city. And for me, that's the mindset that's got to change. I think Danny's right. I think Ian's right. It's a mindset change. It's not about us in our organisations looking down, being siloed. It's about us as community conveners working together because our outcomes are the same. We want better outcomes for our residents, for our businesses, for the people that visit our city. We want to improve health, education. We want to improve opportunity. That then grows the city. So it's kind of a really mature kind of mindset, if you will, to step back and think that through, which is incredibly difficult, easy to say, incredibly difficult to do. I do appreciate it.
If I could come in on this as well, because I did see, Helen, if you don't mind, there was a point around, well, how are you tracking that return on investment, and staying with the topic of digital inclusion, it's great to see Westminster's deployed a free Wi-Fi network across the city. And of course, Sunderland did that. Was one of the first things they did because it really addressed one of the key objectives, which was access to online. And we were really shocked to see the number of unique users in a month, taking advantage of that. But actually, after that, we quickly moved to, well, if they can get online, what can they do online and how can they use it? So we'll put around a program of the digital hubs, in effect training people how to get online and use that online. But importantly, we put sensors there, so we tracked how many people are going to that. So it's footfall sensors and people counting how many interventions we're making, and that's supporting people get online, use services, apply for benefits, apply for jobs, all of the digital training that comes with that. They were so popular that, Liz was great at doing this as well, recognising the sheer level of demand. We move, from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to over 30 of those hubs now across the city, and they are in constant demand. And that is people really saying, help me use services online. So we're really upskilling from a digital capability perspective, a city of people so that there's no one or no place left behind. So people can now go online and use those services and take advantage of the networks we're putting in place. And importantly, we're tracking that return on that investment. So what does that mean for the city, and being able to provide stats and data that shows that we can really lift the entire city up. So I think tracking the return on those investments and understanding those interventions and how they're making an impact is absolutely critical. So it's at the core of what we've done: digital inclusion, return on investment tracking, and the benefits. And that then obviously relates to, once people get more comfortable with the technology and its benefits, to Ian's point, it's about pushing healthcare into the homes. Healthcare in the homes is quite a difficult challenge. People don't trust devices being moved into their homes. What's it going to do? Is it tracking me? Is it, there's a fear factor, but and that all comes down to ensuring that we can use the mechanisms that we're putting in place. And trust me, with over 30 digital inclusion hubs across the city, we can start to educate, where effectively, and Liz went ahead and built a digital home for people to go and see, well, what is this doing, and what are those devices that are being placed into that home, and actually what outputs does that create to help support people in the home. So it's really about building trust. So it's not something that we can just turn on overnight. It is a stepstone to that technology adoption and deployment, and supporting the community to take advantage of it.
And just quickly, before I come to you, Ian, on this one, how easy is it though for all the technology to be put in the home, and also for the NHS to access that connectivity as well, or that data on the infrastructure that you're building in Sunderland, or you've built in Sunderland? How easy is it to connect everybody else? Because I believe there's already NHS involvement in is it NHS Sunderland is already on there, I believe. But how easy is it to extend that out to be inclusive across the whole public sector?
It's built in that very way, Helen, and that's what I was saying earlier. Everything we've built in Sunderland is for everyone. So we've built a very, very scalable, very secure Sunderland data exchange. Basically, we're already ingesting police data, fire data, local authority data. There is some initial health data going in there, working with health at the moment on a big project to bring more health data in, because a lot of the secure data environments that health are building are very much for research purposes. We need very personal and sensitive data in there for local residents to be able to serve them better. But absolutely, as I think Ian mentioned in his presentation earlier, the technology is there. That's in some ways the easy part. I always feel sorry and have to apologise to Danny when I say building the tech is the easy part. It's the winning the hearts and minds, the culture change, the trust and everything that goes around that.
Yeah, Ian, thoughts on that? If the infrastructure's there, like in Sunderland, how easy is it to overlay kind of that standard to go from end to end? And what's the one thing that you would ask the government, whichever shape or form it is, to change to make that happen? What's the thing that needs to change?
So the infrastructure isn't there. It might be there in Sunderland, but Sunderland's an exception. We've already said that. So we're talking we're talking locally here. I mean, the reality is that the infrastructure without the kind of support that Baldwin has provided has not been possible, but it now is. We have super fast broadband becoming ubiquitous. That's fundamental to driving this, no matter what kind of low bandwidth you add to it, but you need the basis that will drive. And then you add in the intelligence, and AI is becoming mainstream. It never was. So we're creating the environment now through convergence where you can do more. But I mean, I remembered when you guys were talking in 2018, because we've been doing this, as I said, since 2015. And we have every year we have a leaders forum where we bring together experts, we bring together examples of good practice. And in 2018, we had Sunderland. We had Wolverhampton, and we had another local authority showing what they were doing. And I thought they'd all fallen by the wayside after the pandemic. I hadn't realized that Sunderland had stayed the course in that regard. But it's very easy now to talk about this incredible success in Sunderland. It was bloody hard to get there. And when you talk to others about you should do this, they can't see it in those incremental steps that are necessary. It's all too big. And the thing about digital inclusion is it's horses for courses. You know, the reality is we're building for the future. There will be digital inclusion. For example, U3A, University of the Third Age, they did not want their members to get too digital. And I got a call from the CEO at the beginning of the pandemic because they had 70-year-olds who couldn't get their groceries because they didn't know how to log on to the supermarkets. And that became a huge driver from a public perspective as why they wanted that digital inclusion. But the other side of the same spectrum is lifelong learning. That's what this will open up. So people become empowered. It gives them additional meaning. So what I'm saying here is you have to step back. You have to step back and step back. So from a government perspective, there is no, we could have one wish, it would be this, because look at the government, for God's sake. They wouldn't even know what to do with one wish. I'm sorry, I'm not getting politics.
Yeah, no, we don't do politics. We do technology.
Sorry.
But yes, no. I see your point, absolutely. But let's go back to that inclusion, because I would say, Elizabeth, is that correct? Because I'm quite stunned by your latest research, where the highest number of people, the demographic having the most trouble is not the elderly. It's not that digital inclusion will eventually, evolve out because people are learning this technology. They're the people now who are having the most problems, the younger generation, the 18 to 24-year-olds. That's a really interesting piece that's come out of there, because if we want, the people by default who are having the most problems with getting online and inclusion online are those who the public sector serves the most. They're the ones most in need, and hard cold fact, they're the ones who cost the most for the public sector to look after. So are we now And why are these younger people finding it difficult to engage online? That's a really interesting thing. Yes. Is it about literacy, Elizabeth? Is it not having English as a first language, or the fact that our literacy levels are so poor coming out of education these days? Why are 18 to 24-year-olds just not being able to access?
Well, we think there's actually a range of different facets that go into it. So, first of all, if we think about the sheer access point, it's perhaps not overly surprising that actually young people are leaving school at the moment. It's a cost of living crisis. There's high levels of unemployment. Actually being able to afford the kit, which is that one-off but potentially quite big outlay. And sometimes people go, oh, well, it's only 100 quid. Yeah, actually, if you're living on the poverty line, 100 quid's actually quite a lot. You've then got that recurring cost to actually pay for the data and the access. We've done other work about how even people who are using pay-as-you-go data have feelings of isolation because that runs out midway through the month. So we've got that kind of first step. But then in terms of the digital confidence, there is no, unless you're studying computer studies at school, and there's a whole range of issues around that in terms of take-up, in terms of enough computer studies teachers to be able to run those sessions.
And the quality of the GCSE content, yes.
And the quality of the GCSE content and the curriculum.
Yes.
But if you're not taking computer studies, which is the majority of people, then you're not learning digital skills at school. It's not embedded within the curriculum. Teachers are not taught digital as part of their initial teacher training. It's not included in any mandatory CPD. And there are, as with everything, there are some schools who are doing outstanding work, and it's absolutely fantastic. But then there's everybody else. And sadly, it's the majority sitting in the everybody else. So we're not teaching children how actually to navigate the HMRC website and what all of this means. We're not teaching children how they're going to engage with a local authority. You might say, well, that's not unreasonable. We can't teach children absolutely everything that they'll need to do. But we're also not providing children with the back end knowledge of why certain things happen, why things are the way they are. We're not giving people the skills that they need to be able to recognise the commonality between how different services work. We're not teaching digital curiosity. The majority of children who will say that they're very confident using social media, and there's a whole debate around that, but the majority of children are saying they have self-taught themselves to use their digital device. So then when they leave school, and the only thing that they need to do is not save a file that automatically saves. The only thing that they're doing is not using TikTok. They actually have to encounter this wide range of digital services that are actually quite complicated. You do need to feel quite digitally confident to use some of them, and you need to be able to understand the language. There was a comment about literacy. You've got to have this intersection between understanding what's required and understanding how to use it. Maybe through that lens, perhaps it's not that surprising that 18 to 24-year-olds are coming out and saying, no, actually, I can't use it unless somebody helps me.
Can I just ask a question in regard to what you call digital curiosity, which I think is highly relevant? There's a narrative here, right? The whole notion of digital learning code is a turn off for a lot of people. But on the other hand, an awful lot of people watch the likes of Dragon's Den and get intrigued even if they don't understand the technology. I work within Innovate UK monitoring projects. I've monitored over 300 innovation projects, and I've been on innovation journeys. It's really exciting, and I've seen all sorts of people from different walks of life. I worked on the Young Innovators program, Women in Innovation, and once they understand what the potential is, once you understand what a technological readiness level is, you don't have to understand the technology, but just what it can achieve, how it can transform your life. Maybe there should be more of that kind of different kind of narrative around what technology can do for you. What do you think of that?
I absolutely agree. I think it's very easy to go down the Python and the coding and all of this. I drive a car. I don't know how it works. I probably could teach myself, but actually I don't need to know. So that's not going to be the most important thing that I'm going to spend my time learning. I just need to know how I drive it and how I do that safely. And technology is really the same. No, it's great if people do want to learn coding. We desperately need more people with those skills, and it can really drive our economy, and it can be a fantastic career for them. But also, most people don't necessarily really need to know exactly how the coding works behind whatever they're using. They just need to know what the opportunities are for them and some of the fundamentals, and move away from that fear that if I click the wrong thing, I'm going to break it. Just be curious, play around with it, find out, but also have that teaching that supports, as you say, that kind of digital readiness.
So that's my number one wish, Helen.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's fully on. Liz, we've only got a few minutes left. So, Liz, your thoughts on that, about how, were you surprised to see that the research came out with the lower demographic?
No, we see that playing out in Sunderland for real. You know, you walk in any of our digital hubs, you'll see children doing the homework. It's really, really sad that, you know, kids have to come to a public place to be able to do their homework. We see that we have a whole host of tech volunteers, nearly 200 now, that go into the digital hubs to volunteer, to give their digital skills over, to help people. A lot of that help is exactly as Elizabeth says. We've got a whole cohort of folks that have grown up with social media and actually can't use a desktop computer, can't create a CV, you know, can't go online and look at government websites, etc., and fill out forms for things. And we see a lot of help coming for that. I also absolutely agree with digital curiosity. A lot of our work, some of the things that we've done, you know, creating one of our big iconic buildings that was being built in Minecraft, opening a competition for schools and youth groups to come and design our new teen spaces in Minecraft. We've actually built that now into the new culture house that's opening in Sunderland in the next couple of months. So we're always looking at initiatives, and we have a big careers program here that we work on locally, where we go into schools, we run smart city workshops, we bring IoT solutions in, we bring data solutions in to do exactly that, raise curiosity, but also raise children and young people's ambitions as to future viable careers in tech as well, which is really key for us.
Bonnie, any last quick thoughts?
Just that final thought from me, and I made it at the presentation. There's a shift that needs to happen in terms of procurement, mindset. You will have to look at long term if you want to move to sustainability, and you need to look for a long term partner that's willing to go on that journey with you. So let's move out of these short termist approaches if we really want to take sustainable growth and innovate for the future. That's my point.
Couldn't agree more, but as came up in the discussion yesterday, it's very difficult when the political cycle is, say, 3 years in local government, maximum 5 years in central government. It's very difficult to look at that.
Local governments and local authorities can contract for longer, and they've got the ability to take a contract. I think that the onus is on private sector to step up and effectively say, okay, let's take a long-term view of projects, and let's go in and stop taking a 3 and 5 year approach. So when you're looking for your partners for these journeys, look for that commitment. Yeah, long term, or else there won't be that fundamental change. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for a fantastic conversation, everybody. Presentations and videos will be out in the next week or so, and we'll be publishing a briefing note rounding up the content from the 3 mornings, and we'll drop you all a note when that's all available. And yes, thank you to my presenters. Brilliant presentations, fascinating, and I know everybody wants to see the slides on those, so those will be available. And have a great weekend, everyone, and stay cool. And we'll end the broadcast now. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Bye.